Please don't hear any of this, Brad.
All right, we ready? You hitting it? Tell me when we're rolling. No, we've been rolling. God damn.
We're Googling over here.
All right.
To nerd sports now, people.
Exactly.
Look out. Do you fear death?
Oh, one of the greatest lines of all time.
I've got a job to it. I've got a job to it.
Kind of like whistles at her, so Dad looks over and the guy's going. And Dad's like, I got the fuck out of there. I was like, oh man, you didn't partake? I thought that was part of the mountain biking community, that y'all just went out there and had sex together in your tight shorts. But
Literally making me 30 sides of red sauce. He just takes it back up.
So that's what I was doing wrong the first time.
That's what you were doing wrong.
Big Pharma's turning the frogs gay, and it's coming after your kids.
And they're going to make them incredibly happy.
Infowars.com.
Listened to so much. Are you...
Kurt Cypert, sir, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, good to see you.
Episode 34. This is, it's been at least probably since graduation as I saw you.
Yeah.
Or have even talked to you.
Probably so. I remember riding a Neo show with your dad, and you and Jared, and
Was that the Fly By Night?
where you went up, pick up a guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah. You still got it?
Was it that Les Paul?
It might be. I don't think it was
probably
Les Paul.
That's probably the one we went up there for.
Yeah. Good times.
Yeah, I was talking to Jared. You know, one thing that Jared and I always had in common was dads that played music and played in bands, and how cool of an experience that was. And my kids are kind of getting that right now, you know, having the opportunity to have gear around or drum sets and whatnot. So, you know, I never really did talk to you much growing up. The dads, you know, were kind of... You were too young to appreciate the wisdom of your elders then, and you were just trying to get, you know, trying to skate through. But what an opportunity to be able to talk to you. So what was it like? What year were you born?
1956.
Okay.
I'm damn near dead.
So you got some life in you left yet?
Yeah.
So 56. So when did you really start getting into music?
I was thinking about that. 10 years old, I knew... you know, the cowboy chords.
Yep.
And the first gig that I remember playing in was a talent contest back in Marshall. Marshall, over in Searcy County, was known for its strawberries. Mm-hmm. And every year, every spring, they had a strawberry festival. And part of that was a talent show. So me and a couple other guys entered. We were in the 6th grade, so I would have been about 10 years old, I guess. I'd been about 66.
Okay.
Something like that. And we played 2 songs. Both of them were by the Monkees.
Okay.
I'm a Believer and Stepping Stone.
Nice.
I
You
can't
still
believe
remember the songs?
I can't remember. I remember that. That's been a long time
that's
ago.
Wild.
Yeah. But, yeah, we had a good time playing together. One of the guys is still playing. He actually went on, one of the guys I was in that little group with, that first little group, went on, became the music band director there at Marshall High School.
Okay.
Later on he became principal, and I just saw him over the Easter weekend. We had our 50-year class reunion, so he was there. Hadn't seen him in years, but yeah, we played music, he and I, with different people all through the high school years. We had a band called Gravel Road, and it got its name from the gravel road that he lived on, and there was a milk barn right on this road that his mother had converted into a photography studio, and she let us have the main room for our practice. And it was made out of concrete blocks and had a concrete floor, and so you can imagine how horrible the acoustics were.
Sure.
We played loud, and you know, we had, you know, quite a local little following, and people would come out to listen to us practice, and you know, we played gigs around We played for dances.
Yeah.
We had a regular gig down in Leslie. Had a guy that owned a storefront that was empty. One of the old stores that had closed long ago. It was, one of the historic type, and he opened it up, and we played dances down there on the weekends, and we'd play till the sheriff would shut us down.
Really?
Yeah, we made a lot of noise, and of course there was all kinds of partying going on and stuff, and people there, the old timers that wanted to go to bed at
Yeah.
dark, they would eventually call, and the sheriff would come down and shut us down. So, and we played through the high school years. I wound up playing bass. I learned the cowboy chords and stuff on the 6-string, and then when we actually formed a band in high school, I played bass. And I went to Springfield, and my dad, of course, Mom and Dad helped. I purchased a Rickenbacker bass. I mean, it was state of the art, and a Sun amp, had two 15-inch speakers in the cabinet.
Yes, sir.
So it was tube run. It was, for me, everything I would ever need, and then some. And I sold it. I regret it every time I think about it. I sold it, and I think the guy that bought it from me still has it. He was a local
really?
guy. Yeah. I heard Jared could tell you more about that, but anyway, I really regret parting with that bass. But I kept it. I had it through college. Same guy. We both went down to Conway to UCA and majored in music. And he went on and got his degree. And
You majored in music?
I majored in music for 2 years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did a little on violin, stringed instruments,
Right.
that kind of stuff. And he went on and got his degree and became the band director. And I got interested in theology
Okay.
my second year in, and I wound up going to UCA as a music major. And for one semester, I started at Central Baptist College there in Conway, and I wound up transferring over there, and I graduated there with a degree in Bible studies.
Interesting. What caused you to be interested in theology then? Did you grow up in a religious household, or?
No, not really. It's you have one of those, as they call it, coming of age type. What am I going to do with my life?
Sure.
Kind of thing. And I decided to pursue truth, and that was the only avenue that I could think of. That, being from a small town where I was at, I thought that would at least be a good start. I wound up following that, and I went through, graduated with a degree in Bible studies and a minor in music. I had enough hours I brought from UCA to have a minor in music.
Okay.
And from there, I graduated in '78 from there. And I went on to Memphis and went to Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary. I got a seminary degree. And, I pastored a couple little churches while I was over there, did a lot of trips.
You did some pastoring?
Yeah. I made a lot of trips, long-distance trips to preach.
Really?
And this was before Jared and Jake were born.
Yeah.
Jake was born when we lived in Memphis. He's the oldest. And I actually, after I graduated there, I had a master's in theology, and it was the prep for preachers, that
Sure.
type of degree, a divinity degree they call it. And I still didn't have my bucket full of that, so I came to Fayetteville to study philosophy.
Okay.
And that's why I'm here. And I finished the coursework for a master's in philosophy, but I never wrote a thesis.
Really?
By that time, Jared was born up here after we got up here, and
Right.
And they were both little. I took a little church out in western Washington County, and I got involved in EMS out there, and I found that intriguing and fascinating, and I wound up, I've thought back on it, after many years have passed, I found the fulfillment of my ministry, if you want to call it that, in the back of an ambulance, not in a church.
Really?
In the back of an ambulance, ministering to people. That was my calling, if you will.
Sure.
Where I found that I could connect with people and have an emotional relationship with people when they were having some of them literally the worst day of their lives.
Absolutely.
Families also, and that became a source of livelihood for me, more so than the pastorate ever did, and more so than music ever did. Although I did reconnect. It was during that period of time when I was going through seminary and was dirt poor, pouring a church mouse. I sold my Rickenbacker, and that amplifier, and I hope the guy still has it and enjoys it, because I sure miss it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I never really got away from the theology and the philosophy aspect of things, and as far as the institutional church, I left that long ago, and in that respect, I'm a skeptic.
I was getting ready to ask, what is your what's your philosophy now on religion?
On religion, I'm a skeptic. I still study it. It's still fascinating to me.
Sure. Same here.
I've discovered writers and teachers that have kind of the same journey that I've had, of getting involved in fundamental Christianity, going to school, going to seminary, learning and continuing to learn, and they realize that it's okay to move on from the traditional religious communities that are led by priests and elders and I look at the Bible now. It's a book of history. It tells the story of Christianity, and even back further, and a lot of the material was borrowed from earlier religions, from Mesopotamia and Babylonia and the Persians, and a lot of the concepts, religious concepts. I've never quit learning. I finished my formal education, and I'm still a student of theology, a student of philosophy, a student of history.
What is it that fascinates you so much about that topic in particular? Is it a where we came from kind of a thing?
Yeah, and
turn this AC up a little bit so it'll kick off. I'll turn it way
I guess now, there's a lot of discussion in politics about America being a Christian nation, and
let's get this close to just a hair.
Okay, and
I do see that a lot. A lot of talk about Christianity.
Our founders, from what I've learned, they were heavily influenced by the French thinkers in the Enlightenment period, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. That was kind of a French thing,
right?
And the idea that I think they came to America with, America being the colonies of the British, and they were British, but they brought these French ideas that humans can govern themselves. A constitutional republic, the rule of law. You don't have to have a king. You don't have to have
Sure.
a monarch.
Yeah.
You can come together in a democratic fashion and govern yourselves. And, it's referred to now as the experiment that's gone on for 250 years.
Right.
That's fascinating to me. Understanding that this wasn't really an English idea. In fact, they fought it. They fought the
Sure,
Revolutionary
yeah.
War over it. And the French helped us.
Yes, they did.
And they helped us not only with boots on the ground, the Indians from Canada and the French, the Quebec French, and then the New Orleans, the French down there, and they got the Indians to help us. And you folks probably know this, Benjamin Franklin was kind of an ambassador. He raised a lot of money from the rich folks over in France. He spent a lot of time over there.
Right.
And he was instrumental in getting the French to help us, and we wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War if it hadn't been for their help. It's that kind of history.
Yeah, certainly.
Christian. They want to claim that they did come here. They wanted freedom of religion.
Right.
And freedom to be whatever, practice whatever.
But not all
religion.
the founding fathers were Christians.
Right. They were not. Some were deists, which they believed God spun things out and let it go,
Sure.
and didn't have any fingerprints on it after that.
Right.
That's what most of them were. Some of them were Freemasons. They were very, I guess, diverse in their backgrounds, their thinking.
You familiar with the Jeffersonian Bible?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what
Yeah.
I've kind of tacked on to recently. Is I've always loved the teachings, but when you start getting into the supernatural and the resurrection, then, I kind of get lost in some of that.
Yeah.
I feel like they're great lessons. There's a lot of value in them, but
Yeah.
whether or not he was actually the Son of God and that
Right.
stuff.
Jefferson took a knife to it and
Yeah.
whittled out what he claimed to be the miraculous, that was superstition and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, those guys were very influential in developing our country and writing the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence,
So
all
those
those
guys were
documents.
young bucks at the time.
Yeah, in their 20s.
Yeah.
And they partied hard.
They fought hard, too.
Yeah. So,
It's kind of wild to think that these young men, of course, Jared and I talked about this too, the generational differences. I feel like up until Jared and my generation, that group, not a ton had changed since our grandparents. I spoke to my great-grandmother. She was still riding a horse to school. But, you still had television, then color television. It was still a pre-internet society. So
Right.
I grew up fairly similarly to the way my dad did, a little bit better off, and he fairly similarly the way his grandfather grew up. But now with the age of the internet and the phones and everything, it's moving so fast that I can't even keep up with it. I'm 42 right now, and I just feel completely lost. Do you feel like things kind of started spinning out of control around the 2000?
yep. There's a good book. It's actually in video, a DVD, and I have it at home. It's called The Great. I'll think of it here in a minute. Anyway, the guy, he's a university professor,
Okay.
and he put out this video that he gives a concise history of the world, history of the human race.
Right.
And he goes, from the earliest days that we have any type of history, prehistory, hunter-gatherers and the nomadic way. And civilization really started after agriculture, where it made it where
Certainly.
people could live together, close together, and have food to eat. They didn't have to wander around and stay separated. So he slows down a lot when he gets that. He talks about religion and politics and the way things were, but he brings it on up to the Industrial Revolution, and that's where things really started to accelerate technology.
Absolutely.
And it's just exponential
Right.
in the way that knowledge and information sharing has taken place in the last 200 years.
Absolutely.
And there's something about it. There's something about it that's transmitted. I don't know. This is just a gut.
Yeah.
That's transmitted in our biology. Dogs are not taught how to swim. They instinctively know how
Sure.
to swim. And I see it in my grandkids. They're much smarter than I was
Right.
when I was their age. They pick things up faster, and maybe it's their exposure, maybe it's their environment. I don't know, but I think that there is some type of accelerated transmission and application of knowledge that each generation builds on the previous.
Sure.
And that's true from myself to my dad and his generation and
Certainly.
my dad's dad. My great grandpa, who Jake is named after, he was Jake Cypert. He came from eastern Tennessee on a covered wagon pulled by 2 oxen.
Yeah.
I don't know how he got across the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
But anyway, he settled in Marshall.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
And I grew up in the house that he.
Did you really?
Yeah. And
Is that house still standing?
yeah. And he, his original house was a log house, and we made a barn out of it. And that's the only barn I knew really when I was growing up. But anyway, he sold wood off that wagon, pulled by those 2 oxen. And I've thought about his world,
Yeah.
He was quite a character. I mean, he cut wood, loaded on the wagon, took it to town and sold it, because that's all people had fuel
Right.
for. Wood to cook their supper with.
Yeah.
Keep warm with.
Absolutely.
And that world is gone. It
100% it is. Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
we'd like to get back to those days in some respects, where everybody knows everybody and everybody helps everybody. But as far as the information available, you and I can pick up our phones and have access to virtually any subject matter that we.
Sure. Learn how to build a car engine from nothing. And
YouTube has been extremely helpful to me.
Sure.
Just getting by with the tinkering aspect of how to change oil in my diesel truck.
Sure.
Yeah. That.
Absolutely. Well, there was Americans especially were working to live for a long time. Now we're working to buy a bunch of useless shit we don't need on Amazon.
Right.
Exactly. You had to, and I wonder. I reflect often on, the mental health thing and the crisis in this country and social media and all the different things that are wreaking havoc on our youth, and not just our youth, on everybody. But back then, you didn't have time to fuck around with feeling sorry for yourself and mental health and all that. So you were working and putting up fence or repairing fence or hunting.
Hauling hay.
Yeah.
Best shape of my life was between my junior and senior year in high school. We hauled hay,
Yeah.
bucked square bales on a 1-ton truck. My first cousin, a year older than me, we bought a truck off our great uncle. It was a 1-ton flatbed, and we gave $500 for it, and we paid him the $500 off of our hay hauling, and we blew the rest of it.
Did you?
But best shape I was ever in my life was,
Oh, 100%.
was doing that kind of work.
And that's another benefit of that kind of stuff. It kept you in shape.
Yeah. And you appreciated the pennies and the dimes that you had. You
Certainly.
got a dime a bale. And
Certainly. And now, today I did a lot less physical labor than my dad did and so forth. And now, it really irks me when I see 2-year-olds in a basket at Walmart just on a tablet, because you don't know how much danger that kid is in from getting, the dopamine hits and the constant needing of.
and the family, the family fractured I was last Sunday. We went to eat pizza, and we were sitting in the booth. It was Jake's significant other. It's her birthday, and Marla and I took him out for pizza. And we were sitting there in the corner round booth, and a woman and her daughter came in. I guess it was their daughters. Looked like it to me, but they sat there, and each was on their phone. They were facing each other. They had the table between them, and daughter was on the phone, mom was on the phone, and they didn't speak a word that I could tell. And I was sitting where I could see both of them. I could see her side, and I don't know if they ever even looked at each other. And I'm thinking, what's the point? You're going to get some
pretty
pizza?
sad. Yeah.
You're going to get some pizza and have lunch.
That makes me
but
really sad.
there's no interaction, and that goes to, you know, what you were talking about mental health, and
Yes, sir.
you know, the cyberbullying and all
Right.
that crap. You know, whatever's going. That's the downside to our technology.
Yeah.
Part of
Well, it
it.
can be a beautiful tool, social media.
Yep.
It's like anything. You can kill
Yep.
somebody with a hammer, you can build a house with it, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
social media I found very useful for promoting and getting the word out there.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I've also found myself, you know, just getting sucked into stupid bullshit that I don't need to be a part of. And it's awful. And I have to just tell myself, hey, no, just use
Exactly.
it for what it's used for. But could you imagine, you know, your kids didn't have to grow up in that environment. I thank God every day that we didn't.
Right.
The shit we were up to, but it's such a new challenge for kids because we didn't have to worry about how many followers we had and how many likes we got and how many.
Right.
You know, we found validation in other ways, and not all of it was healthy, but. I feel like now my friend Drew's got a theory about what he calls the zero world, and anything on the internet is not real. And you can
Yeah.
have these arguments or conversations with people, and sure, maybe it's legitimate viewpoints and arguing back and forth, but it doesn't really affect your life day to day if you can just walk away from it. Video games, another example. I think a lot of video games, especially today, teach you a lot about resources and conservation, and you know how they've gotten really realistic, especially Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, it's a western, and you have to hunt, you know, for your food, and you got to conserve and craft your bullets and whatnot. You know, there's a lot of good lessons to be there. But again, if you're, you know, like during COVID, if I'm just sitting there playing 4 hours straight, not being productive,
Right.
you know, I think that's when you start getting. But it's like anything, moderation is key. But when parents just kind of let the YouTubers raise the kids, then we're in for kind of a big shock. And I think we're starting to come into some of that now as the generation who's grown up with that is aging into adulthood, and it's quite frightening.
Yeah. I know.
You know, I know parenting has also changed a lot. When you had kids, I haven't really asked anybody this question, but you were raised a certain way. Did you make a conscious decision when you were raising your boys, I'm going to do things differently than my parents, or do things similarly, or did you just kind of wing it?
Wing it. not a book on
You
it.
still haven't gotten your parenting manual in the mail, I'm assuming.
Exactly. And two things I regret. I will share that. And I think I've told the boys this. If not, then they can hear it. The first one is, you know, I referenced a while ago, I made my living in EMS. You don't get paid for shit. EMS, so I worked the equivalent of 2 jobs, and I wasn't there a lot when. Now I wish I had been.
Sure.
Made more time for them. That's one regret. The second regret is they've seen me get angry, and I've been angry at them, but not, you know, but that's an embarrassment to me of letting my anger. And my mama was Irish, and I've got a temper, and
Sure.
and I've unfortunately they've seen me, and so I regret that. So not spending enough time with them, or as much time as I would like to have, and let them see me angry is my two main regrets of
That's
parenting.
powerful that you've reflected on that enough to regret it. You know, a lot of people wouldn't care.
Yeah.
So that is interesting that you've reflected on that and you think that.
Yeah.
But you know, I know Jared. I didn't know Jake as well, obviously, but you know, Jared thought the world of you growing up. He thought he had one of the coolest dads, and I did too. I thought you were a cool dad growing up. I obviously didn't know you very well, but it was. I think you made a tremendous influence on Jared anyway.
Well,
he's very proud of you. So
well, I'm glad.
the anger thing, though, I wanted to ask you about that. I also have a streak. My great-grandfather, I told this story on the podcast recently, he was a veterinarian, and this is just one of many stories. But he had this little dog yapping at him while he was delivering a calf, and he kept telling the owners, "Get this dog out of here. I'm gonna take care of it." And finally, he took that little dog out in the field and punted it 30 yards. It was the last time he ever did business with him, I'm sure. But my dad had told me stories about him being he wasn't a physically abusive man to his kids, but he had a very bad temper. He was breaking things, and my dad had a temper. I had one, and so that's it. That's just interesting that you mentioned that, because there's times where I've lost my temper in some way and broken something or had a fit, and then you feel like shit afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, this isn't anything abusive or hurting your kids physically, but it's what they're observing.
Yeah.
Is that kind of
It's
because
gotta
you
be
lost
emotional
control
trauma.
of
It's
where
got to be emotional trauma to them.
yeah. Did you observe a lot of anger growing up with your dad, or
No.
you said your mother was the Irish one, maybe from her?
I can give an example that I never met her grandpa.
Okay.
But he was Irish. He came from Ireland. Him and his mom.
Okay. So
he was red-haired and freckled and all that. And he was a school teacher back home. And this would be early. My mom remembers him when he died. So she was born in 26. So it had probably been around 1930, something like that, when he passed away. So that's how long ago it's been. But he was a school teacher down there, and you know, the community schools, country schools, were you had the kids first grade all the way through, and some of the guys failed or dropped out and came back. And you might have one that's 20 or 21, 22 years old, and you know, he was a male school teacher, and his practice was, when somebody smarted off, he'd pick out the biggest of the bunch that was causing trouble, and he'd have the whole class, which, you know, the whole school, go outside. He'd just beat the shit out of him.
Really?
First day, right off the bat. I mean, he'd fist fight him and
No shit.
and whip his ass, and he had control of the school from
Sure.
then on. That was
The alpha
that was
principle.
common. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to negotiate.
No.
There wasn't no negotiating. You know,
Right.
these old boys, some of them corn-fed, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They could, you know, whoop a mule.
Yeah. Indeed.
But he had the temper. But that didn't serve him well, because his boys, one of them was my grandpa. They were playing another community baseball, and the boys got into a fight out there on the field somewhere out around second base, I think. Anyway, he picked up a rock. He was left-handed, and he zinged that rock in there to break up the fight, and it hit one of the kids from the other team in the back of the head,
Really?
and the kid died that night.
Oh my God.
So, you know, he was mad that they were fighting. He said, break it up.
Right.
And he just picked a rock up and just, you know, threw it in like he would a dog fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, of course, both communities were in an uproar about it. And they were going to have a inquisition. That's not the right term.
But kinda.
They were going to
Investigation
They were
of
going to
some
look
sort.
look into it, and the family was all gone. He got his pistol, went up to a cedar thicket behind the house, and left a note. Said there won't be any need for that.
Right.
So he took care of it
Wow.
himself. So that didn't work out for him. And my mom remembers that happening, and she remembers them taking him to bury him in the wagon. You know,
How old would she have been?
she was
4?
she was little
5.
yeah. And so the temper thing doesn't work out for my family.
Yeah. That's my grandfather that had the temper took his own life in 2022. It was a profound moment for me. The second member I'd lost to suicide. My aunt took her own life when I was about 10 years old. His daughter. So that's tough on a family that you leave behind.
Yeah.
Did that have any repercussions for your mom?
No, she was so little.
So little, just didn't really.
And her dad, who was his son, he passed away when I was little. So I never got to really know him, other than a kid knowing Grandpa.
Right.
And he was bedridden with rheumatoid arthritis, so he couldn't get out and do Grandpa stuff. He was what they called an invalid
Right.
back then, and he couldn't even turn himself over in the bed.
Really.
He had arthritis so bad. But I wanted to talk some more about music.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't want to leave it at the Rickenbacker loss. So after I got into I guess the EMS thing, and I got settled into that, making a living and stuff, I rediscovered music. It became a central thing to me once again.
And you're up here now.
Yeah.
Northwest Arkansas
Yeah.
by this time.
Yeah. And I got to think about it. I think the thing, I always listened to the radio, that was before Sirius XM.
Right.
You had to listen to the local stations.
Yep.
They were playing Stevie Ray Vaughan, Crossfire. That's the song that tripped my trigger and got me. That's some good shit right there.
That's one thing I remember the most about you is your love for Stevie Ray Vaughan.
And Stevie Ray could play a Strat like nobody.
Yeah.
Business. I mean, and it came from the heart. And it's like Chris Layton said, the drummer, Stevie's drummer, he said, Stevie just picks up the guitar and this music just starts coming out and you can't help but just play along, And so they were all fired up about it. When Stevie started playing, you couldn't resist playing with him.
So was that the first track of his you heard?
It's the one I remember. It's the one that did the most about getting me to refocus on music.
Sure.
And the blues, of course, is what.
Yeah.
I mean, he could get some nasty sounds out of that. And to me, it was just what music ought to be.
Yeah.
And that album, Crossfire's on. I'm not sure what the album is. One step, in step.
I couldn't tell you.
In step. You've got Tightrope, and there's a bunch of songs on there that are first rate. And this was after he sobered up. It was right before he got killed.
Right.
So it was kind of his last go at it. It was his best, in my opinion. He and Tommy went to rehab and got clean. And,
right.
And then they wrote this music that was just out of this world. And
they wrote it after being clean?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting.
That album was I believe it was his last one. I may need to be fact checked on that, but from what I remember, but I bought the book, and the boys remember me having that book, and I read it.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a biography of Stevie Ray. Sometime before that, it was in that time period. I went up to Sigler Music in Springdale and bought a Stratocaster.
Yeah.
An American.
What year
Strat.
would this have been?
I want to say it's 86, 87, 88, somewhere in there.
Okay.
It would have been
And you hadn't been playing
no.
up until here.
Right. I sold my Rickenbacker, which was the bass.
Right.
And I bought a 6-string because I wanted to learn the 6-string. And really everything besides the cowboy chords that I learned as a kid, I taught myself,
Right.
or with the help of tablature and,
Sure.
and that kind of stuff. And YouTube's been a big help lately.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got some.
Nice.
They've got some guitar teachers on there that are really first rate. But I've learned it's just like my education in philosophy and theology never stopped, and this is what I do. I get up at 2 in the morning and I go and I sit down with that 6 string and I plink on it. That's,
You now?
Yeah.
Really?
That's my therapy.
Is that a
I
kind of
guess.
a wake up?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
It's what I can actually break a sweat doing it, and I have to be quiet or I'll wake the
Yeah.
household up. But when I have time and I have that leisure to do that, I just lose track of time.
It's kind of a healthy therapeutic thing to do, because like dirt biking or anything, when
Yeah.
you can just focus your attention on a thing that you can't be distracted from, it's a good healthy habit to have. Productive.
For a while there, the folks I worked with, they could tell you I carried that Strat to work with me. If we had any downtime at all, working 24-hour shifts, I'd plink on it.
Yeah.
I rode my motorcycle and carried that guitar on my back.
I remember Jared or Jake, one of them had one of those little pig nose amps. Do you remember that
Yeah,
thing?
yeah,
Did you
yeah.
ever use one of those?
Not really.
Just as
no.
a portable, because I remember they were real small.
I tried it out.
Yeah.
I gave it a run.
Yeah.
But that was their deal, and I never did really. I've got one that it's got backing track that'll play. It's bass and drums that'll play. I bought a little amp that you can play through and play along with different.
Yeah.
Everything from jazz to
Oh, yeah.
Blues to pop type stuff. Just vamp stuff where you can practice, and I really enjoy that.
Do you play with anybody now?
No,
Do you have anybody to jam with?
no, I did. This would have been in the 2000s, probably 2010 maybe. I mentioned Mark Finney a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Mark came out and played with Jake and Jared some, and Mark introduced me. He was a drummer. He introduced me to Dan Denham, and Dan was a couple years older than me, I think. So, he's passed away now. But Dan had been a guy, a Dixon Street, well-known musician down there. Dan had written some stuff, and Mark took me out, and I was, could still play bass. Of course, I had 6 string at home. I always kept a bass around. Anyway, I played bass with Dan and Mark, and Mark kind of, I think he moved somewhere anyway, and there was another drummer that had played with the Hog Wild band. He played the traps, and he was really, really good. And if he could stay sober, that was his problem.
Yeah.
So we played some. That was my last gigging, and I tell you when it was when we were gigging. It was in the 2004, 2005. I just remembered because I was in nursing school at the time, and some of the folks that were my classmates would come out to listen to us play. So that's how I remembered that. So,
Okay.
So I became a nurse in that time period too. So I've been a paramedic for 42 years, and I've been a nurse for about right at 20 years.
Right.
So I played a little music then, and gigged a little bit, just having fun. And this place here reminds me a lot of Dan's hangout,
Yeah.
where he practiced and played. And I enjoyed that. I learned some stuff from him. Some of his stuff was original, and it was fun to play.
You still looking to play some?
Yeah, I'm mostly retired now, so I've got more time than I did.
Well, I don't know how it's going to go, but I've got a bunch of musicians coming out on Wednesday this week. I've started doing some musical performances on this show, where I'll have musical guests come on, and we'll do a song, or somebody will do a song, and you just put it out by itself. But there's a lot of people that play music that don't have anyone else to play with. So I'm having some people out to just meet each other, and what are some opportunities or things we could do. You're welcome to join us. We're going to do it Wednesday night, but I think it'd be fun to almost kind of thinking out loud here, but rather than because a lot of people in my age or at any age, when you're busy being in a band, it's part of the reason we quit. We all had kids, and anything you're doing,
make a living.
Yeah, you're making a living, and you got a family to take care of, and so anything you're doing with the band is taken away from that. And so, I quit it because of my kids, and then my kids forced me back into it. They wanted to see us play,
right.
And so that's why we started playing again. But then you start meeting people doing the podcast, or just meeting people, and there's a lot of people who don't have time to do it full time. But my thought is, what if you had like a little musical troupe? And if you had 3 or 4 people that sang, instead of working up a 90-minute set, maybe you did 15 minutes, and you just booked a little troupe, and certain people got up and jammed on certain songs.
That's awesome.
I'm trying to get a musical, just some jams going.
Yeah.
Because it's so, and plus playing in a band for 20 years like Durham, you get in that block of what this band is, or it's like if you're the guitar player of Aerosmith, you've got a sound, and it's the way it's got to be, and it almost really limits you in other things that you wouldn't normally do. Song ideas from other people. We did a cover of Wild Night not too long ago.
Yeah, I heard that.
It was. I never would have chosen that song, but it was a fun song to play, and it was fun to do it with Emma. And it's just I think those kind of. And it's a lot less work. I just got to work up one song, and then we can just do it and play it.
Yeah, that's great. What you were saying there, I'll go getting not having time. You got work. I was listening to the radio coming out here, and they played Freebird. Of course, you always have to just listen to it.
Yeah.
Or I do anyway.
I do too.
And it's an oldie but goodie.
Yes,
and
sir.
the first time I heard that song, I saw him play it live at Barton Coliseum.
Is that right? The first time you heard it, you saw it live.
Yep.
Man, that's a story.
And Skinnerd was opening up, and I thought, that's a weird name.
Leonard Skinnerd, yeah.
It's a weird name. I bet they're a flop. And I can't remember who I'd gone to see.
Yeah.
This was while I was in college, so Conway to Little Rock was a doable trip.
Yeah.
And it cost enough money back then to go to a concert, but that was a good outlet. And Skinner come on stage, and man, they blew it out.
Yeah.
And
76 was the year for them.
Yeah, they played Freebird, and who's the guitar player that was it Alan, was that his name, that has the curly hair, the long hair, that played the
Collins.
the Collins, yeah.
Was it Alan Collins? It's Gary Rossington.
Yeah. Anyway, the original guitar player that played the lead on that song, he, they played and got your attention. Let's put it that way. And
was it him and Rossington that did the duel at the end, or was that? Didn't they have 3?
Rossington passed away recently.
Yeah, I heard that.
But the song never ended. It's like they're going to quit. They crescendo up, and then it's like, then they start playing again. It's like, wow, man. And
Alan Collins, yeah, we were right.
I remember his curly hair. People who have curly hair have trouble getting it long, it seems like. But his curly hair was long, way down over his guitar, and he was waving that hair and getting into that. You know what the lead to Freebird sounds like.
Oh yeah,
it's like that's the shit right there to a 18-year-old.
And so you'd never heard the song before?
Never heard it before. I never heard of Leonard Skinnerd before.
And so you'd have been about 20?
Yeah, 18, 20, I don't know. And they blew it out of the water. And I remember going home and telling my dad that, because I was impressed.
Yeah.
My dad was a military, type, and no nonsense when it came to long hair and that kind of stuff. He looked at me. He looked at me and was like, "Why are you telling me this?" And by that time, I'd started growing my hair because I was away from the house, and I had hair down here. It's all falling out now on top, so I had to grow a beard. But anyway,
it's one way to do it.
But where I was going with that, I got sidetracked on the concert. But I remember hearing one of the band. This was on YouTube. He was being interviewed by somebody, one of the music people on YouTube, and he was in the band with me. He played bass, and he said I always sucked at playing the bass, but they made me play the bass. And anyway, he talked about their practicing. He said they had some little house out in the country, and they would go out there.
Jacksonville.
They'd spend all day long.
Yeah.
Nobody would leave.
Yeah.
And they'd work songs out.
Yeah.
And they had some lady that was like a fan groupie or something.
Yeah.
I guess it brought them food and shit like that. But they just cohabitated till they hammered out their music. And you can tell it, And every time I hear that bass line or a bass line, I think of that guy. I go, whoever they had playing bass on that song on the album did a good job.
Yeah.
Because all the guitar parts in Freebird are great, including the bass.
Yeah, that's one of those songs that I still won't switch it. Like you said, you got to listen to it.
It's like if you switch the channel, you'll turn to stone.
And it's one of those zeitgeist songs that just hit. It's larger than life now, and I've never really heard anything quite like it at that level. I mean, it was just so raw.
Yeah,
it felt like. I always feel like the best music is done by young people because I think that you're not worried about the rules or what it's supposed to be. It's how can I do something different? You're more creative. You're trying to find these avenues. I think once these people get into it and have some money, then you play it safe maybe. But yeah, because they were just kids when they wrote those albums.
Yeah, during those days, Led Zeppelin was my favorite band.
Jared and I was talking about this the other day. I was telling him, I asked him who the GOAT was on guitar. He said Stevie Ray Vaughan. I said Jimmy Page was for me.
Yeah.
And
Page had that raw talent.
Yeah, and, he was kind of sloppy sometimes, but you knew where he was going with it. Some of the live stuff, like the what was that live album they had back in the 70s? Was it?
I can't remember.
But like some of the jams they would do, so different from the record, and they take it in different directions, and you could just tell they were probably really high.
Yeah,
but they were on a journey.
Yeah, and they were put together. They were a put together group.
Ironically.
I think Page, needed people to play, and the agent guy, whoever that was, Peter
Grant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Found Bonzo, and he found Plant and John Paul Jones. And they meshed.
It was a super group, essentially.
They sold out arenas by themselves.
Yeah.
And
they had their own jet. I mean, that was I wasn't alive for that. I've just been able to go back. But like living through that, what was that like when Zeppelin came out? Did it change the landscape?
Yeah.
Forever?
It did.
Yeah.
They made it possible for hard rock, to follow.
Because the Beatles had reigned supreme for a decade, right?
Right.
I mean, you lived through that.
And Hendrix was out there, but him and Hendrix and Janis Joplin, those people burned out way too soon.
Yeah.
They were a flash in the pan compared to some of these other.
But man, how they've stood the test of time with the small amount of work they've had.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Hendrix could play nasty blues, but he could also work the melody and the major pentatonic.
He was on a different frequency than most people.
he could play the chords and wrap the melody around it at the same time, and I was gonna recently I discovered again Alice in Chains, and for some reason the song "Man in the Box"
Yeah.
just rang a bell, and I started investigating it a little bit, and you know, the lyrics and the singer, you know,
Lane Staley.
yeah, Lane, was just phenomenal. You know, Plant could wail. Robert
Oh,
Plant
yes.
could wail,
Yes, sir.
but this guy could really wail, and he could nuance his voice, you know. And I used to not give a shit, and I didn't pay attention to the
I was
lyrics
getting ready to
at all.
ask you, when Jared was growing up, did you appreciate the 90s music at all when it was coming
Yeah.
out, or was that the young kid shit? I don't want to...
Yeah, this is one group I've rediscovered.
Yeah, so you did kind of like them when
Yeah,
they were out and about.
Metallica was one that gripped my
Really? Yeah.
Chain
I remember
back
when
then.
we used to go listen to the Black Album over there, and
yeah.
that came out.
Yeah, Metallica had some good stuff.
Because my dad turned me on to a lot of 90s music. There were bands he was listening to that I was like, I don't know,
Okay.
you know, unless it's from Seattle. I'm true grunge, right?
Yeah.
And he turned me on like Better Than Ezra and Live and
I heard them on the radio today too.
yeah,
Live.
it's wild to think that stuff's 30 years old now, but
It doesn't seem possible.
90s was, and maybe it's just because I moved on, but I feel like that was the last decade of really kind of new sounding music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people have tried to copy or capture Alice in Chains, but other than that, few out. And then they had a small catalog before Lane died. I mean,
Yeah.
I think 3 full albums and 2 EPs. I mean, it was a small body of work. But
Yeah,
a lot of talent.
Jerry, I don't know who wrote the songs. Jerry, I guess, frontmaned the band for a while, but his singing just wasn't as who's the guy that 2014ish was their singer? He was a black guy or half black.
Yeah,
First
well, he
name is
still
William.
is.
Is he still with the band?
Still with him, I think. I'm trying to think of his name. I can't even
His
think
first
of it.
name was William. I'm getting old, man. I'm getting senile. I can't remember stuff.
Well, shit, I've never been able to remember. I think this is probably doesn't help it any. William
Duvall.
Duvall.
Yeah. Yeah, he can wail. He can pull that song out. He can do it.
Yeah, he can. Have you listened to any of their new albums? It's very. It just doesn't have the same
Yeah.
spirit. Lane was such a. There's a certain. I've talked about this before, but to me, as a writer, as a songwriter, I think a lot of the best stuff that I write comes from the deepest pain, and you can hear a lot of that. In Lane Staley's a great example. I mean, the guy was a heroin addict.
Yeah.
He was dying
Oh,
on
yeah.
stage for years,
Right.
and you know, I don't know what his story was growing up specifically, but there's a lot of pain in there. Joplin, Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan. It feels like there's a lot of pain coming from some of that. And I was talking to Ashley Perkins. I did a Sam Cooke with her song with her recently, but she was talking about how, to me, I grew up more in the rock world, you know, and country was a totally different thing. But I felt like, you know, it was more of a storytelling, or at least an unveiled storytelling. Country's pretty, here's the story, whereas rock is more kind of metaphor. But as she was pointing out to me, there's a lot of pain in country music as well. It's told a little bit differently.
Right.
And you can arrange songs in any format, back and forth. You know, a good song's a good song. You can take that. Was it what was the Simon and Garfunkel song that metal band did? Was it Sound of Silence? I can't remember who covers it, but there's a metal version of
Yeah.
that out now.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. I can hear the voice to that. It's not Godsmack, is it?
No, I think it might be. Is it Disturbed or one of those Leave in the comments,
yeah,
people.
that's it. Disturbed.
Is it Disturbed?
I think so.
Maybe. But it's a neat arrangement. But what's cool to me is seeing songs like that continue to have life after, even if it's another version of that song. Like, my kids think every Beatles cover is superior to the Beatles version, which is kind of sacrilegious to me. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
But, that's what they grew up listening to the Beatles, but that's not as cool as, Ghost or Volbeat or whoever they're listening to now. That's not even Dad's music. That's like Grandpa's music.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important for bands to do covers of songs to introduce those to new generations.
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s and of age, I guess. I started kind of in the 60s, and some of the best music was written back in those, like you said, by young people.
Yeah.
Back in those days, I mean, the blues scale or / rock scale, whatever you want to call it, where you've got your minor third and your minor seventh, in the chords and in the melody, and it just has that sound to it that is rock and roll. I mean, blues rock.
Absolutely.
And you've got your bands like the Allman Brothers that bring up the minor third back to the major third, and you've got your country rock.
Yeah.
Skinner's another example.
Sure, absolutely.
Southern rock.
Yeah.
And, that's the major pentatonic primarily. Not saying that's all it is.
Were you a Black Sabbath fan at all?
Oh, yeah.
Were you?
Yeah, my wife still, when I make her listen to Ozzy, she just freaks out. Yeah. I go, who is that? She goes, it's Ozzy. Like, don't ask me again.
That's a wild phenomenon. The Black Sabbath, the Ozzy. You talk about a living legend. That guy.
You guys, 9 lives.
Still putting out records. I mean, they're not great, but he's still doing it. But you got to have a purpose. I mean, if he'd have stopped making records, he'd probably been dead a long time ago. I would guess.
If Sharon hadn't have found him, and he probably would be dead now.
Which time? How many times has she found
the first
him?
time?
Yeah.
She was some type of manager, wasn't she? Or worked?
Well, she was Black Sabbath's manager's daughter, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
But how wild for him to find some young guitar dude named Randy Rhoads who had played with Quiet Riot for a little bit, right? Wasn't that the band he had been in?
Yeah.
And just happened to be available and just happened to make Blizzard of Oz. And I mean, what a second chance. That could have gone completely differently.
Yeah. If he hadn't killed himself crashing his plane over Ozzy's trailer. Mobile.
But that was a completely avoidable accident, kids.
Yeah.
It's my dad's buddy Rick Owens was telling me recently, every great dirt bike crash comes right after the words "watch this."
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody in that plane said that,
Yeah.
or at least was thinking it.
I heard he was buzzing Ozzy because Ozzy would freak out whenever that plane would go over real low.
Yeah.
It's like, and he was just messing with him.
Well, see, that's something you and I both remember is we'd read about these musicians, and it was almost, for lack of a better term, like the Olympic gods or something. These rock stars out there living the dream. I love music, and these guys are out there doing it, larger than life. I don't know that kids have that anymore these days. Music's so fragmented, because back then everybody pretty much had the same radio stations, the same television stations. So as a culture, Americans shared generally the same. You had your different genres and whatnot, but it was pretty limited. Now there's 1,000 bands in the Cookie Monster vocal category or whatever it is.
Right.
I don't know if we'll ever see another Journey or Metallica or.
Yeah, I agree.
It's kind of sad in a way, but at the same time, there was, it's nice to have choice, but those bands were really screwed over by their labels a lot of times too. Mm-hmm. So it's almost selling your soul for that kind of stardom.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Who's the bass player for Motley Crue? What's his name? He's a radio personality now.
the bass player for Motley Crue?
Yeah. He's got a Sirius XM radio.
I can picture his face. I can't think of it.
Tommy Lee's the drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Nikki Sixx. Isn't that him?
Is it Six?
I think it is. Is it Motley Crue?
He's Nicky Sixx isn't the guitar player?
Wasn't he the bass player?
Is he? I don't know. I'm not a. Yeah, it is Nicky Sixx. You're right.
I heard him.
Well, who's their damn guitar player then?
I don't know.
Anyway, all right. So Nicky Sixx.
So I had Sirius XM for a short period of time after I bought a truck. Yeah, they throw it in for free. So I was listening to his show,
Yeah.
and he had music. I don't know what, I was traveling somewhere. Anyway, he told the story on himself. Of course, he had a drug problem,
Mm-hmm.
and he was wiped out. He was stoned on his ass, and he'd been. This had become a habit with him, and he wasn't making gigs and stuff. And so the band was going to play. He was in L.A. and they were going to play somewhere up the coast, maybe Seattle or Portland, something like that. So he didn't show up with the rest of the band. So they called up. And this has been a while back, back when he was having all these problems.
Right.
It's been years. And he telling on himself. He said they chartered a jet, and they sent some people over, pick him up. They put his ass on the plane. He was the only person on there. Flew him up to the gig, and he played the gig. They put his ass back on the plane, flew him back to L.A., and sent him the bill.
Yeah.
He said back then it was $70,000. For the,
Back then?
Back then, yeah, $70,000.
Damn.
For the jet, and they made his ass pay that out. He said that was more than I made in the gig, or mostly. I can't remember.
That was
what he
probably
said
a
about
hefty bill, yeah.
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 But
That's crazy.
They sold out a place, I mean, they had to have him, and they chartered a jet, put his ass on it, didn't send him back, and made him pay for it. I thought that was. We talk about, the ins and outs of being in a band and bigger than life. And
Yeah.
I guess he was indispensable for the gig, but eventually he got clean and sober, and now he's a recluse. He talks on the radio, but
Right.
he doesn't get out in public.
Right.
Because he says he has two addictions, one to drugs and the other to women. And if he goes out, he disguises himself because he doesn't want a woman to approach him, because he doesn't know if he can resist an invitation. And he's had plenty of those. So
Yeah.
maybe that's too much TMI,
No, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of people would struggle with any kind of self-control, really. It's why it's that moderation thing with anything.
Yeah.
It's like I'll let my kids play video games and whatnot, but there's definitely that's a thing that my mother was very concerned about, that because we grew up, Jared and I, in the video game era. That's when that stuff was in the home for the first time. You'd have the arcades and you'd go out, but now it's in the home. Now it's in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we were mostly made to go outside and play, and then,
Right.
it was a privilege to be able to do something like that. It was new, and parents were kind of scared of it, and rightly so. And now, it's kind of gone to the extreme. So you mentioned seeing Skinner in '76. What other? You probably got some good concert stories if you're in your heyday at that age. What do you got for me here?
Oh, I saw ZZ Top
Back in
the day when they were a little old band from Texas.
Yeah.
They still wear their cowboy hats.
Oh yeah.
And they were just kind of starting to grow their beards then. So that's when LaGrange was out.
Okay.
Was popular.
Heyday.
Yeah. Saw them. I saw groups like Rare Earth.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really good. The Doobie Brothers.
Yeah.
Manfred Mann and the Earth Band. some of the groups had a large black following, like Rare Earth, and I remember being on the floor. Of course, you never took a seat in the bleachers. You always down on the floor.
Yeah.
And the wave, I guess, started. The assholes in the back started pushing, and I was oblivious to that kind of stuff happening. Anyway, there was a girl standing in front of me, and those were the days of the afros, right? And so she had this huge afro, and I mean, people were falling. They were being pushed so hard, and somebody fell into me from behind and totally caught me by surprise, and my head flew back like this because they hit me from behind.
Yeah.
My head flew back, and my mouth flew open, and my head just buried in.
It's got a mouthful of afro.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, so I gave it a couple of that, and it's like, well, her hair tastes and smells clean, and whatever she put on it, it was like some type of beauty product.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad. At least it was clean. But you could see the dent in the back of her head from my face being planted in.
It's like one of the, what was that little nail thing you could put your fit, what were those called?
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I apologized to her. I said, I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. She said, I know it is. But she had this big dent in the back of her head. In the back of her hair.
So where were you seeing these concerts? We didn't have the amp back then. So where were you
This
able
was
to
at
go?
Barton Coliseum in Little Rock.
Okay.
Down by the fairgrounds.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't even know if it's...
Well, you were down out of you were living in Marshall at the time?
I was living in Conway, going to school.
Okay, this is in Conway. You're going to school now.
So it would have been 74 to 76.
Gotcha.
Probably. Somewhere in there. And, I went to a lot of concerts down there.
You still go watch concerts today, or?
I haven't been to a concert, and I can't tell you when.
Really?
And
what about, you still go to, what's that? Is he trying to call you? Yeah. Answer it. Put him on speaker.
That's all right. He's gone. He's probably won't know. When are you going out to Brad's? So, I thought about it a while ago. Dixon Street, back in the 90s, there was some good music.
It was happening.
Coming through
Yeah.
there.
Yes, sir.
Some of the best blues bands that I've seen, and blues musicians came through Dixon Street back in those days.
Yeah.
It was totally different than it is now.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Oh, I know. I saw it
It's
change.
gone to Uber or something. I don't know what it is, man.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
There was also a pretty cool original music scene in the 90s. You could
Yeah.
headline some of the smaller clubs doing all originals.
Yeah.
Kind of got spoiled by that.
Yeah. But there was Chester's was down there.
Is it? It's not still there, is
No.
it? No.
It's something else now. Chester's had good music on a regular basis. Every weekend they had good.
They sure
George's had good music, and right across from George's, I can't remember Dave's.
Yeah, when Dave's on Dixon was there, they got a lot of national acts. When I was in high school and was able to get into some of those shows, the Nixons, Better Than Ezra.
Yeah.
Saw Jerry Cantrell there.
I saw Insane Clown Posse come through on their best. Did you remember them?
Oh, I remember. Did you go see him?
No, but I saw their bus come through town. I saw it turn down
you
Dixon
saw the
Street.
okay.
As a matter of fact, and their bus is wild.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they had these clowns. I guess it was their own faces in their garb. It had Insane Clown Posse. I knew of them, because of, I guess, my exposure to that music in the day. And I think they came to Dave's. I'm pretty sure it was Dave's.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
And anyway, I saw them roll into town. I thought, that's going to break things up around here a little bit.
Well, who was the shock rocker back when you were growing up? Was it Alice Cooper?
Yeah, he was one of the first. I had some of his early stuff.
Yeah. School's Out era.
Yeah. $1 Billion Baby, I remember, is the name of one of the albums.
Were you into that?
Yeah. That was when I was still at home in high school.
Yeah.
Alice was. I heard he's going to be somewhere and has somebody else with him that's equally as.
Marilyn Manson?
Maybe so.
Are they teaming up?
Yep, I think he is. Yeah.
That's just a guess. I remember Marilyn Manson was the most taboo thing in my household when he came out. And to me, it was just an extension of, it was the next progression in that sequence. I don't think. He's actually Brian Warner, the guy that plays Marilyn Manson. Really a sharp guy.
Yeah.
Pretty sophisticated dude.
Hey, which was that him that acted in Sons of Anarchy?
I believe so. Yeah. I haven't seen it, but yeah, he had a role in it.
Yeah, he was in prison. He was one of the
sounds right.
The backer leaders that was in prison, and when some of the Sons of Anarchy got, and then he was one of the characters in there. Big dude. He's
tall.
Bigger than, yeah,
I haven't seen it. Is that a good show?
Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah.
We watched it.
Did you watch Yellowstone?
Yeah.
How you like it?
We liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go see the Horizon movie?
Hadn't seen
Kevin
it.
Costner did. It came out, I don't know, a month
Hadn't
or
been
so
to a
ago.
movie in centuries.
Well, it's apparently the first time my dad and I went. So he recently retired. He's not a big TV guy, but he got into Yellowstone. I'd loaned him like the first season, and he's retired. So he calls me back like 2 days later. You got the next one? It's like, man, I didn't think you even watched TV, but yeah, I here's all of them. So he blows through them all, and he's wanting to go see this movie. And it had probably been 20 years since he'd been in a movie theater.
Yeah.
He's like, the seats recline now. It's pretty funny because we probably go, I don't know, not regular, maybe a couple times a year as a family, but it's $100 to get in and out of there with 3 kids.
Yeah.
Doing some popcorn and whatnot.
I do a little part-time work at the Stand ER down in South Fayetteville, and heard one of the nurses talk about going to the movies, and somebody said, I love going and getting popcorn. I go, popcorn, hell? So you can't afford it. Pay to get in the movie.
Fortunately, movies haven't been that good in a while, so it's not a lot that can get me out of the house to watch one. I mean, the streaming thing has completely changed the game.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's such a different world. I remember it was a big treat to go to, well, back then it was Curtis Mathis, if you remember that, on Martin Luther King there. Back when it was just 62. And then you had Blockbuster come in.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal to go pick out a movie. And you had to rewind them or you'd get fined. So people started buying rewinders to not wear the VCR out.
Right. Cassettes.
Yeah, cassettes offered kind of a neat freedom, though, because you could record onto them. So that was fun, making mixtapes in the 90s and just listening to 104.9 The X. I remember when they first started airing. It was probably early 90s. And they were playing stuff, Stone Temple Pilots and Smashing Pumpkins, Collective Soul, Beck, and really just finding a connection, all that. It was so different than the stuff I'd grown up with.
When I was a kid, we used to have to listen to AM radio, and you were shitting and getting if you could get WLS out of Chicago.
Really?
And on FM, on Saturday night, like at midnight, they had a show called Beaker Street, and they played progressive type rock, the stuff that Mom and Dad wouldn't let you listen to.
Yeah.
During, if they knew we were listening to it, but you could pick that stuff up on Baker Street. I don't know how many folks can remember that, but that was what the cool people did.
Yeah.
Sit up and listen to Baker Street. It was a show out of a station in Little Rock.
It's a long way from YouTube.
Yeah.
Because you can find just anything out there now. It's really wild how. What's the band I'm thinking of? Have you heard Greta Van Fleet?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of those kids?
They sound like Led Zeppelin.
A little too much for a little too long.
Robert Plant. I heard somebody interviewing him and says, "What do you think about whoever it is that sings for Greta Van Fleet?" And Plant goes, "I hate him."
Well, I thought their first album was kind of cool because it's a bunch of young kids emulating Zeppelin, which, hey, I'm just glad you're listening to something, from then. But as they've gone on, they're still doing it. I was kind of hoping they would kind of get their own sound. But,
right.
Yeah. We were talking about Jimmy Page earlier. I thought, wrongly, that if I save up the money and buy the guitar, that's what'll make me sound like Jimmy Page. Once, like the Tenacious D, Pick a Destiny, once you have the thing, it still took a lot of hard work to be able to play any of those solos. But the riffs, I love more than even the solos. With Jimmy, it was the riffs. That riff to Moby Dick or Heartbreaker, pretty much anything off the first 4 or 5 records. I mean, it was just so different from, the Beatles had some cool riffs, but they were still kind of square, Day Tripper might have been the kind of the wildest thing they had. Then Jimmy's bending notes and doing hammer-ons and little licks in between them. Like, what was it like when Zeppelin came out?
Oh, they were.
Like, were they pretty immediately successful? Did they come on pretty quick?
Yeah, they came over here and sold out arenas.
You didn't ever see Zeppelin, did you?
I wish I had of, but I don't think they ever came anywhere close enough to really, make it feasible to go. I would have gone if they'd been, somewhere close, for sure.
But you lived through it. I mean, you saw all the hype and the... Song Remains the Same. That's the name of that live album I was thinking of. Because they did a movie of it, too, like a concert video.
Yeah, it was kind of...
Jimmy had that double neck SG. I mean, just some iconic... just thinking back, because I had my dad was a big rocker, too. Watching videos of Pete Townsend slide across the stage on his knees and, Roger Daltrey swinging the mic. It was so iconic what they were doing in the 70s.
Yeah. We've got AC/DC still doing that, and they're old.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, damn. And the Rolling Stones still, I guess, are rocking too. But I guess they're as good as they ever were, I imagine.
That's got to be a weird feeling. We went and saw Matchbox 20 recently, and we took the kids. And Rob Thomas was talking about how, when they started, they were kids themselves, and now they're seeing, kids and grandkids come to the show, and you never really think of that.
Right.
But if you last long, if you're lucky enough to do it for that long, and you still love it, what a weird trip to see people have kids that then start coming to your concerts who weren't even alive when you made the records, but have gotten into it. Like, what a blessing as a musician for somebody like a Metallica to say, our records are still selling from 20-something years ago to another generation.
Yeah.
It still speaks to somebody in the future. And I think a lot of the 60s, 70s stuff, to me, still speaks to me. Because it was so good and it was so innovative. Because, I mean, when you start, musical recordings weren't even readily available until the 1950s. And back then it was probably, what was it, just 45s pretty much, right? It was just a single, and the LP didn't really start catching on until the late 60s.
Right.
So...
Yeah, and you listen to some of that old stuff, it's real scratchy, and...
Sure.
And there's a lot of background static in it and stuff. One of the things I've noticed when I'm listening to music now, the more that I learn myself, what I know compared to other musicians, it's a thimbleful compared to,
Yeah.
But the more I learn, when I hear it, somebody else playing it, I know what he's doing. And to me, that's satisfactory. I know the guy's pulling it off.
Yeah.
He's getting away with it. He's worked at it, he's got it down, and he's making it happen. Just something as simple as a sliding into a chord tone, at the end of a riff or something like that. that's a technique that works, and
But it's cool learning those. And I think
Yeah.
Stevie might. I don't know if he was the first one to do it, but I remember seeing him do it where he'd play with his thumb on that root note, so he could lick
Yeah.
while keeping that root note there. And that changed guitar for me because I could do that, and I still had freedom of movement instead of having to bar the whole fret.
Oh yeah,
These little cool things like
Jimi
that.
Hendrix was a master at that.
Yeah, he was great at it, too.
thumbed
All those
it.
blues guys.
He
seemed to.
thumbed that. He'd hit the bass note with his, he'd finger it with his thumb,
Yeah.
and thump that bass note, and a lot of the rhythm came off of that too. The chucking,
Sure.
the dead strings that chuck, and I watched a interview with Joe Walsh, from the
Oh, yeah.
Eagles. It was the dude. He was his name is Paul. I don't know. He was it David Letterman's band director?
Oh,
played
yeah,
piano?
yeah.
Paul Schaefer
Paul Schaefer, yep.
was interviewing Joe Walsh, and Joe was talking about his guitar technique, and he said, he played a few riffs for Paul, and they were talking about it and stuff, and he was talking about, like when he was in the James Gang, that dun, 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 dun. That was chicken picking he learned from some country dude, that chicken picking
Yeah.
type stuff. And they got to talk about his rhythm stuff. And Joe says, when I'm watching a guitar player, I don't look at his left hand. I look and see what his right hand is doing. If he's working the rhythm along with his
Definitely,
lead playing,
yeah.
he says that's what a good guitar player can do. And that's right. You see these guys, these shredders. They're double picking one string and that to me is, it's okay. You're shredding it. You're getting it. But somebody that can carry a rhythm and a melody at the same time and get the chord tones, that's, to me, is most satisfying.
It's kind of me with the double kick pedal. It's like there's a lot of good music came about before the double kick, and now everybody's got to have one. It's
Right.
It's kind of the evolution of it. What's funny to me is seeing how interested, like, my kids are huge music fans, but they gravitate more toward metal. But my oldest one's really getting into the 90s and Alice in Chains and some of this stuff, and I wonder, you kind of have a responsibility if you have children to show them the good stuff instead of just letting them go out there and find what's popular, because at some point you gotta be the music appreciation teacher.
Right.
So, even if it doesn't take, you got to do your due diligence and saying, hey, at least listen to these 10 albums. Like, if you had 10 albums on a desert island, what are you taking? Or even 5? What are your top 5?
I couldn't tell you, man. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Hard, isn't it?
It is.
There's so much great stuff out there. I don't want to throw the White Album in there because it's a double. It counts as one. But
I'll tell you somebody that's in a niche all of themselves is old. God damn, guitar player for Pink Floyd,
the guitar player,
David Gilmour.
Gilmore, yeah.
That guy, he doesn't have to play fast, but he knows what he's doing, and he knows how to bend into the chord tones and harmonize with the rest of the music that's being played.
Were you big into Pink Floyd when you were growing up?
I learned to appreciate them more
Later on.
later on.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched The Wizard of Oz along with Dark Side of the Moon? You never have?
Well, no, I don't guess I have.
It works.
Does it?
It works. Yeah. And
I've heard that. Now that you mention it, I've heard that before, but I never.
There was a DJ on 104.9 The X back in the 90s, Nick Thomasma. He started Local X, so he was one of the first guys that started letting local music go on there. And he's come to our shows and have us on his show and play our music. He was a cool dude, but I remember him having me and the guys in Sober when I was playing with them over at his house. We're going to watch The Wizard of Oz. He had found... because apparently you got to sync it up at the right spot, like at the third lion roar, you got to drop the needle on, or with a cassette, a different time. But he had found somebody who had done it, who had synced the audio up with it. And I don't know if it was because we were super high, but it really did line up, like in all the right spots, and it was really wild. And I went back and did it one more time, and remember it lining up really well. And of course they deny it. And I don't even know. I think it's one of those cosmic glitches. I don't think they did it intentionally.
Yeah.
I think it's just a coincidence. Because that would take insane mastery of a lot of skills to do that. But it's there's mine. Yeah, put that on your bucket list. Try that out sometime.
I did see where supposedly one of the Munchkins hung himself in the background of one of the scenes. Where they were out in the woods and there was a tree back there.
Yeah, is that true? I've heard that as well.
I did see that. I don't know if it actually happened or if it was something that one of these conspiracy things made up. But
well, you had a lot of great movies coming out during that era too. When you were in high school, what were some of your favorite movies back then? Were you a big cinema guy or not as much as the music?
No. Yeah, I'll tell you, probably the one that stands out the most is Easy Rider.
Yeah?
Went to see that.
Well, you're a biker guy. Were you biking back then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've had a motorcycle since I was 12.
Okay.
And my cousin, the one I was telling you about, we hauled hay together. We weren't 17. You had to be 17 to get into a restricted movie. And Marshall has a drive-in theater. It's still there.
Really?
Yeah. The one here closed on 112.
Yep.
And that one, and the one in Marshall, and then there's another one in Mountain View. I think for the other three left in the state.
Yeah.
And Marshall's is still going. It's operated by a family that I went to school with. The kids, and one of the daughters, or the daughter and her husband still run the show. But
that's awesome.
Anyway, we went there. We talked my dad into going, and he didn't know what he was going to see. We knew he'd go to sleep. He did. He laid down in the back seat and went to sleep. We sat there and watched it, and we were afraid to turn it up too loud. Afraid if he'd woke up, he'd see the nude scenes or hear the language or whatever,
right?
Or get wind of what the plot was and make us leave. So we just had to sit there and be real quiet. But Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper, that was cool. And I adored those motorcycles. I had quite the motorcycle catalog, not catalog, but fan club type stuff with choppers and all that. I just had stacks of them. It's like comic books is to some people.
Yeah.
I had motorcycle mags. And
that's a funny thing you mentioned, because my dad was a mechanic when I was growing up, and then he got into parts and service and management and all that, but I always grew up around the car business, and I didn't care anything about it, but he's always trying to show me little things with the car, and I was more, I wanted to read science fiction and fantasy and all that stuff, but my dad couldn't read fiction, but he could read a technical manual. It's just whatever interests you, and then that guy. It's just it's interesting to me. It's like all three of my boys are completely different. My oldest one's the fantasy reader and Dungeons and Dragons, and my youngest one wants to go chop wood for fun, which is strange. It's, how do you get there? How much of it is nurture versus nature versus time and era? a lot of factors.
Yep.
So I wanted to take it back a little bit to the religion thing. Are you familiar? Have you ever heard of Billy Carson? He's
guess I am.
he claims to be like an ancient technology or ancient civilizations expert. He's been on a few podcasts. He was on Rogan recently, actually, but he claims to have read a lot of the Sumerian tablets, and they mention otherworldly beings being here from early on, called the Anunnaki. Are you familiar with the term the Anunnaki? What do you know about that? Do you know much? Or
You could put it in a thimble inside a thimble.
yeah. Do you think it's a possibility, though, that there were beings here that could have guided humanity along their path?
Well, I think that they still don't. You know, I would leave it as a question mark.
Sure.
They still don't really know how the pyramids were built or who built them.
Right.
That would be.
How would you do
something-
it today?
How
could you even do it?
You can't. I don't think we have the technology or the engineering skills to work with rock on that magnitude.
Even today?
Even today,
Right.
I've heard that from people that are
Right.
like
I've
engineers.
overwhelmingly heard this, yeah.
That we don't have heavy equipment, cranes and that kind of stuff that can lift that kind of
Right.
weight. And there are like pyramids and building structures in South America too that they know where this stuff was quarried, but it was like 40 miles away,
Right.
and up a mountain to where that they placed them.
Yes.
So how do they get this kind of tonnage out of the quarry across this rugged land
Yep.
up this mountain and set them in there in so much that you can't get slip a piece of paper in between
Yes.
in the cracks, a credit card between the cracks. So there was some type of technology that's been lost apparently.
Have you ever heard of Graham Hancock? Or he's got a show on something or other about ancient civilizations. What's his buddy's name? There's a Drew, leave it in the comments. What is that guy's name? There's a guy who comes on Joe Rogan with him sometimes that believes that they had some kind of harmonic resonance to where they could send a frequency to certain things and negate the gravity of it, and that's I don't know what the evidence for this is. A lot of this stuff is just rabbit holes are fun to go down. You can't prove any of it, but it's fun to consider the possibilities. But if we did have some kind of, Billy Carson's theory is there was some kind of galactic civil war like there was in Star Wars, and the rich elites had spacecraft to where they could leave, and so they set up shop on Earth, kind of divvied it up, built themselves a pyramid, which was like an electromagnetic battery, which provided them electricity, and then they presented themselves to the local population as gods, and then eventually ended up interbreeding with them, which is why there's kind of the missing link, is that they kind of hyper-injected their DNA into the species that was here. And it's hard to prove now, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. I've gotten acquainted with some teachers, I guess you would say, that they specialize in PhD types in Sumerian languages and Akkadian.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to watch them on YouTube some, and I would have to defer to those types to interpret like the tablets and that, because it's way out of my...
You don't read cuneiform.
No.
I don't think very many people do.
I would have to defer. They can, and they've put the work in, the diligence in to learn it, and it is neat to listen to them recite the stories about the Sumerian gods and that
Absolutely.
sort of thing, and how that the Hebrews are connected, in their borrowing of those types of like the earth, the world, universe being formed out of chaos, and
Right.
the dragons that were involved, and one they fight and one overcomes the other and shreds it to bits, and that
Right.
became the stars, that kind of thing. And
Do you feel like the Bible was borrowed from some of those more ancient?
yeah, those stories.
You
yeah.
start with the Sumerian tablets, which I think are the oldest
Probably
recorded
some
histories,
Mesopotamia, yeah.
and then it just continues to kind of get retranslated, or
Yep.
the stories reshook.
Yep, exactly. And those stories are rich. I mean,
Absolutely.
rich in that area. It was, the Levant, and a lot of the stories about Jesus, the man Jesus. Whatever you think about him, I think he was an apocalyptic prophet. He was a preacher.
Sure, absolutely.
But a lot of these stories were attached to him. His working miracles and stuff. You can find this. Well, you talk about the resurrection. That was a common theme.
Sure.
A motif in a lot of religions and a lot of heroes. God men.
Right.
He wasn't the only one, and there was
That's true.
those before him, and it was an honor, for a fallen prophet or whatever to receive this type of honor, to be placed upon him, and that's pretty much, I think, what the New Testament is. And there are people that study Homer and are experts in the classic Greek, the mythology and stuff, and they can see how Luke and Matthew and Mark borrowed these stories. Mark was the first one, and Luke and Matthew more or less elaborated on what Mark started.
Right.
And they added the nativity, and Matthew gives a different genealogy than Luke does, because they didn't know each other was doing it, apparently, or going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they each give a totally different genealogy, and Luke has the most detailed nativity story, and then Mark has the briefest resurrection story, and Luke and Matthew, and then John goes ahead and really elaborates on it. And
Right.
John's the latest, and so his has got more of the
Sure.
the theology
Yeah.
attached to it, where Jesus actually is God in the flesh.
Right.
And but that's cool. I mean, it's an evolution.
Yeah, it is cool.
It's an evolution in human thought, and I appreciate it for that. And it's like, wow, I don't have to have the institutional interpretation of what this means to appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I just let it be a historical
Right.
thing that's been influential, probably more so than anything else in our civilization.
Absolutely. Who do you think Jesus was?
I think he was in the strain of John the Baptist. I think in that day and time, if you understand the historical context, they were oppressed by the Romans, and the priests that were running the temple and doing the sacrifices and everything were pretty much corrupt. And so you had these zealots that were fervent for restoring purity to Israel, and they thought that if purity could be restored, then God would return and bring judgment and condemnation on the Romans and relieve them from the oppression.
Right.
And so you had these breakaway groups like the Essenes that lived down around the Dead Sea and wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's rich. They were discovered in the 1940s.
Yep.
And there's a lot of insight into the religious. They would be the purists of the time, and they hated the Jewish rulers in the temple because they thought they were corrupt.
Right.
And they were in cahoots with the Romans, you know, and they were getting rich.
Sure.
And so they withdrew from that, and they did their own thing out there, and they baptized, and it was a ritual thing. They did it every day to establish the. And they thought they would usher in the second coming or whatever of. They thought God would come back and judge, and relieve them from their oppression.
Right.
And so it was probably out of a strain like that John the Baptist emerged. You know, he was in the wilderness. He ate locust and wild honey, and he wore camel's skin. You know, and his message was repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. You know, it's coming down. You know, it's the apocalypse. And so Jesus was baptized by John. I think that's true. I think that's history.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Yeah.
And then Jesus kind of took the mantle from John, and
a little more marketable.
Yeah, and I think he was an apocalyptic preacher, and you know, whatever you think about the red letters in the New Testament, you know, the Jesus sayings.
Sure.
There's been a lot of study, and that's a lot of what the guys do that sit in the ivory towers and, you know, write books.
Yeah.
They analyze that stuff, and it gets kind of technical to follow. And I've done a lot of, you know, that's what my education consisted of.
Yeah.
For
Absolutely.
But anyway, Jesus probably, if you accept the betrayal and the crucifixion, and that's one thing that scholars do agree on, that Jesus was crucified by the Romans.
Right.
That's the one thing historically that they all agree on. He was crucified.
Right.
And Jesus thought that this generation, in fact, he said this generation will not pass till all these things be fulfilled. In other words,
right,
God's going to come and he's going to destroy the Romans. And so Bart Ehrman, who's one that I've been influenced by a lot, he's got a story. His backstory is a lot like mine. He went to Princeton, became a PhD, and he teaches now and has for a long time at University of North Carolina. It's one of those two. But anyway, he thinks that Jesus had a following, and he thought that when God came back and delivered the Israelites from the Romans, that Jesus made the mistake of telling these people that he would become the king of the Jews. And that's what Judas took, that bit of information, and he betrayed him to the Romans. And that's what they put on the cross was,
right,
here's the king of the Jews. Why would they do that?
Right.
If they didn't have inside knowledge.
Right.
So I think that's pretty credible. I mean, it's a compelling, not credible, but it's a compelling.
Absolutely.
Potentially historical. We never know for sure, but Jesus was probably crucified by the Romans, and just like all people criticize. They did it for an example. He made himself out to be the king of the Jews,
Sure.
which that means he's against us.
Sure.
We got to stomp out any type of revolt or anything before it happens. So make an example of him, hang him on a cross. This is what happens if you try to subvert the government.
Well,
Roman government. And
you're a history buff too. What's your take on the Israel-Gaza situation? Because this is something that no matter how far down the rabbit hole I go, it seems to never end.
no, it
But
never does.
there's people on both sides who claim to be authorities and support
No.
Israel no matter what, support Palestine no matter what. I can't get to the bottom of it. What's your take on all this?
It's all a bunch of assholes fighting each other over land. They need to get along. They just need to. We're all human beings. It don't matter, where you live on this side of the river or the other side. It's like the Hatfields and McCoys.
Right.
We're all hillbillies.
Yeah.
Let's get along.
Yeah.
Let's quit killing each other's kids. And doing stupid ass shit like that.
Yeah.
There's no sense in it, and I'm talking about both sides, not just one or the other.
Right.
Stop it.
Yeah.
It's
It's ingrained in their society now to hate the other, and the other is yeah.
and it's like, your DNA is just about 100% the same.
Darn near.
And you don't have any business making them the other. Palestinians making the Israelites the other, and vice versa. They've done this for ages. That's what the Old Testament's all about. A lot of it, but just stop it. And I think that's what we need to do. There's always competition for resources, right? Putin wants to take over Ukraine for the resources. He wants to restore the old Roman Empire,
Sure.
not Roman Empire, but Russian
USSR,
Empire.
yeah.
And he wants to colonize, and restore the Soviet Empire.
Right.
And
I don't think he has designs for world domination, though. Do you?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure, what he wants. I think what's been stated is he wants to restore the old
Sure,
Soviet Union
that's my
and
understanding.
those vassal states around.
Yes.
And so that's what that's all about. It's like, stop it. If you look at the landmass of Russia, a lot of it, I guess, is tundra, but it's massive,
Yeah.
massive landmass. But he wants Crimea because of the ports.
Well, of course, yeah. You want those ports.
And you've got a more hospitable climate down there for agriculture and
Sure,
and
absolutely.
those
Like
resources.
the breadbasket of
Yeah.
the world down
So,
there.
You can understand it, but it's like,
Sure.
make peace and get along and trade.
Yeah, but you got to eliminate greed, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, real easy if you could just eliminate that greed.
Yeah. You go back to the Persian Empire and the Silk trade routes
Mm-hmm.
and who was the explorer, Marco Polo. Just get along and trade, and give them, whatever they've got, wheat and corn, trade them something that you're all, what, Aryans or what are they over there, Caucasians?
Yeah.
There's no sense in fighting.
It's easier said than done, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we got a lot of polarization in our country right now. And
Yeah,
it's
it doesn't make any
both
sense.
sides thinking the other one's in a cult, and
Mhm.
it's really terrifying, and I hate it.
I've got kinfolk that we disagree on politics. It's not that we disagree on politics. It's personalities and characters and stuff.
Sure.
That I don't like him. I don't like her.
Sure.
I think they're an idiot. But when it comes right down to it, we all want the same thing.
Well, I think if we just realized we want what's best for the country,
Yeah.
we might disagree on how to get there, but we,
Yeah, exactly.
we do love America, and we love our country, and we love our brethren.
Yeah, and there's there's nothing that's going to let that, my kinfolks and stuff, there's nothing political going to come between us,
Yeah.
It's not worth it. It's just not
It's
worth
really
it.
not.
And if somebody disagrees with me, okay, that's, whatever blows their hair back,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get butthurt about it.
Yeah.
Screw it. It's like, I'll still get along with you. We still go hunting together.
Well, there's so many things that you can talk about or get along about or have in common that has nothing to do with that one little thing. It's like the politics and religion thing used to be very taboo.
Mm-hmm.
You don't talk about it at the dinner table or at the family gathering, because it might cause some heated. But you can have a good time without even getting into those things. And I feel like we're judging people based on their political party or their political candidate, and we're judging this whole person based on this one little thing, when there's a rich trove of personality to be enjoyed.
Yeah, I've had a good discussion recently with a relative, and they're pretty well informed, and what we come down to agree on is that we're getting screwed no matter which way we turn.
Yes, sir. I'll get with you there. Yeah.
And I read something, I don't even know who it was from the other day. Probably it's been a while back, but anyway, we pay taxes on everything we have, or we get, and then we're taxed over and over again.
Yep.
And we were talking about that, and he says, you pay off your mortgage, but you never really own your property, because every year you got to pay your property tax. If you don't, they're going to confiscate.
They're going to take it.
They're going to take it from you. Same thing with your, anything,
vehicle or whatever. Yeah.
And it's never ending. There's we're taxed on our groceries. We're taxed on to drive. We're taxed on the gasoline that it takes. There's a tax on everything. He said, yeah, and you die and you leave your money to your kids, they're going to effing tax that too. It's like, well, yeah, they're going to get you no matter which way you turn. So what it boils down to in politics is who you want to get screwed by the most.
Well,
that's the person you're going to vote for is who can you tolerate getting screwed by the best.
I have come to believe in studying, World War II and the things we learned from Hitler and other world leaders. I feel like we have absorbed into our own government, and call it the deep state or unelected bureaucrats or whatever, but there is an entity that runs very separately from any elected officials. And I feel like Democrats and Republicans are just a really easy way to manipulate people into hating each other. Because as long as we're at odds, we're not pointing the finger at them. They keep us distracted at, you're a Trump supporter, or you love abortions, or whatever it is, and we're just so nasty to each other. When if we ever did unite, that's the scariest thing they could possibly imagine.
Exactly.
So it's in their best interest to keep us divided.
Years ago, Central, I worked for, the ambulance service, had the VA contract, and VA contracts, different rules. They didn't have to follow the state rules.
Sure.
So we could have drivers that weren't medically certified. All they had to do was drive. They had to have a for hire chauffeur license on their driver's license. That all they would do is drive on these VA runs. And we went to Little Rock a lot, out of the VA hospital up here. And anyway, we hired a couple of guys that were retired truck drivers.
Okay.
And one of them he was an older man in World War II. And he was a pilot. He was a reconnaissance pilot in World War II. But before he was a pilot, he was shot down 4 times.
Oh my God.
He said, actually, I was shot down. He said, I ejected twice and I crash landed twice. But he survived it.
Damn, what a lucky motherfucker.
He flew across enemy lines, and he said all I had was a .45 but my plane was loaded with cameras now too. You know, that was the technology back then. Is they took pictures of where the enemy was and all that, their trade or their supply routes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he said before that he was a spy. Yeah, he was. I think it was before. Anyway, and he was located in Turkey for he could speak Turkish. Anyway, he had a fascinating story.
Yeah, I
know.
bet.
And so coming back, when it was just the two of us, you know, I'd tend to the patient going down or whatever, and then ride back, we'd bullshit.
Yeah.
And he'd tell me, and he, you know, it's the spy thing, you know, just like in the movies, the old movies. He said, we studied the Russians and you know, we didn't trust each other, but it's just like in sports now, you know, college, and you learn your opponent. You know, you learn his moves, and what he looks like, and what his family is, where they live, and all that stuff. And he said, I knew all these guys that we were dealing with. And he said, you know, the practice everybody did, they were sending out the papers, you know, they had to hand carry it, they didn't have email or whatever. So you had to hand carry it in a briefcase, and they had it, you know, locked on their arm. But there would be like 4 of them out, 3 of them were decoys, 1 would have the goods. You know, so it's like which one has got it, so you had to follow all 4 of them.
Yeah.
And he said, my guy come out of the building, here I go, I'm tailing him. He said I don't know where they were. I think they were in France. Anyway, he said, I followed this guy. He said he took me through the streets. We walked. You know, I stayed behind him, and I was tailing him. So he'd go into a store, go into the store behind me, he'd come out the other side. I'd come out behind him, but I'd find him on the street. And then he said, we got on a train, went to a different town, you know, and he said, I couldn't find the guy. He said, I wonder where the hell he is. He said, maybe he went in this little pub, tavern there. He said, I ducked in the door and said, there he sat right at the table. He said his briefcase laying on the table. He goes, come here. He goes, I know who you are, you know who I am. This is bullshit. I am tired. Sit down, let's have a beer. And they sat down and he said, we had a productive conversation. So I got to know him, you know.
Is that right?
Personally. He said, this is all bullshit that we're doing. There's no sense in us playing this game.
Yeah.
Yo, let's just sit down here and become friends. And he said, we made friends. And he said, I said, why in the hell can't the up-to-ups do that? You know, why?
That's a powerful story.
It is, man. And you know, that's just one of the little gems I picked up from somebody like that has a hell of a story.
Well, we're too stupid to make decisions.
Yeah.
Right? We elect these people that, the way I look at it is, you run for office and you're a good person, I don't think you have what it takes to make it to the top.
No.
If you have a moral center, there's no way you're ever going to be on a presidential ticket.
You certainly don't have the money unless you get the donor class to back you. And what do you got to do?
But what do you have to promise?
Yeah.
You have to sell your soul to get there. So, you know, it's sad, but the guys who should be king don't want to be king because of all that it entails.
Right.
But power and money attract psychopaths, sociopaths.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kind of people who are running for office.
Yeah.
And you got to pick a tribe. So do I want my sociopath or their sociopath?
Exactly.
You know what?
I've had this conversation recently. Believe me, exact same stuff that we're talking about. You pick the one that
you
don't
align with the most.
Yeah, the one that you don't care to screw you over because one or the other of them is going to do it. You know.
Absolutely.
Which one do I want screwing me?
but how do we? You know, it's one of those things. When it's young, it's real easy to blame people. At least in my experience, my parents this or the government or whatever it is, and until you realize none of these people are going to save you or help you, you gotta make what you want to make of it yourself. You've got to work hard. You've got to do whatever it is you want to do. Nobody can do that for you. But as a people, it's real easy to blame Trump or Biden or whatever, when in reality, we as the people kind of need to save ourselves.
Yeah.
But how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do we effectively do that?
The only thing I can think of is just to be kind. And I guess that maybe is going back, making full circle here. That's what I regret. You know, my boys seeing me angry. I don't want that to be how they remember me. I want to be kind and generous, even to people that are kind of, you know, hard to.
Sure.
And that's, you know, us coming full circle again. That's what I found I was able to do in ministering to people in the ambulance, if you will. Then later on it was the ER, then it was the ICU, then it was flying with airback, you know, being a nurse medic. Just be good to people and try to help them out and make them better, make their day better. They don't know what you're doing to them medically most of the time, but they do know if you're kind and if you're genuinely concerned about them, you know, and whether or not you're just, you know, fast tracking through to get it done, you know, and don't really care. And, you know, burnout's high in the work that I've done, you know, being a medic for as long as I have and working ERs and ICUs, burnout's high. And there's been people with superb technical skills come through and they burn out just. But you've got to learn to love people and connect with them emotionally. You've got to care for the patient. You've got to care for their families. You know, it's a big task, but you've got to have that element to be successful. And
I wanted to ask, you say it's a high burnout. Is that just because of what you're seeing and you can't desensitize to it? It just continues to affect? Because I imagine there are some people who do get desensitized. You've been doing it for a long time. Do you feel like you're desensitized to it, or are you able
tired.
You're tired.
Yeah, I'm.
So I bet you've seen some horrible shit.
Oh yeah, and you know, I've retired a couple of times and I work a couple of shifts a month, or I'm actually scaling back from the part-time work that I've done, you know, at the ER. It's kind of a retirement job that not saying it's not serious, and I'm not serious about it, but it's my way of backing out.
Right. That makes sense.
I'm not as young as I used to be, and I'm not as bulletproof as I used to be. I'm getting older, and my reflexes are slower, and my memory is not as quick. And you know, I can still be good to people, but I don't want to be the source of forgetting or getting something mixed up. You know, there's a lot of detail you've got to follow.
Yeah.
And
you're saving lives. You need to be at a high level.
Yeah, you need to be on top of your game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can feel the wear and tear of the years, you know, you know, every once in a while you have an experience that renews your vigor, so to speak.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not like I'm going to get up and fight and heal the sick and raise the dead today. I don't have those days anymore.
Yeah. But you mentioned you've retired a couple times, but you keep going back to this profession.
Yeah.
Why is that? You could have a guitar shop or something.
Yeah. And
why is it this that keeps drawing you back?
It's just I don't know. It's what I've done for so long.
Yeah.
You know,
the comfort in knowing what you're doing.
Right. And you know, the investment in something else is you know, the financial aspect of it.
Sure.
And the security that I have doing what I'm doing, what I know to do. But you know, something out of this line that's not as I guess filled with not responsibilities, I guess a term that applies. You know, you don't want to hurt somebody. You know, you don't, and you don't want to lose the ability to care. You know, and have people be able to show it so that people know that you do. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
Yeah, it does.
I find myself more and more just liking, you know, being alone on my place and not having to interact with people too much. You know.
Do you think you could get into a place where you could just retire and just chill?
Yeah.
Or do you think that'd be too much free time?
No, I'd find something to do.
Would you
Play my guitar.
play some music?
Yeah. Crank it up. Read, study. I've got a whole library of books that some I've read, some I need to reread. You know, authors that I respect. You know, that have done their diligence to what I think probably are speaking, you know, truth to their subject matter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing I do at 2 in the morning. When sometimes it's play my guitar, read. If I play my guitar, I'm going to stay awake. If I read, I'm probably going to go back to sleep.
Right. What are you reading these days?
I'm reading. I read about the historical Jesus quite a bit.
You seem to gravitate toward that quite a bit.
That's my.
It's fascinating to me too.
Yeah, that's the New Testament writings. You know, Paul was the most prolific author of the New Testament. Yeah, he was a different character. And church history, you know, stuff that, you know, interests me, like what we were talking about early on, was the influence of the French on
our country,
the Constitution, Declaration. I heard something. I haven't fact checked it, but apparently, who is it that gets credit? Is it Jefferson or Madison? Madison, isn't it, that gets credit for writing the Constitution?
For writing it?
Or is it the Declaration? Yeah, I think it's the Constitution. Anyway, I've got to go back and read it, but
I'm not certain.
I discovered this in passing, and I haven't had time to spend a lot of time on it. But it was a Frenchman that wrote it. It's either Madison or Jefferson. I think it's Madison.
Okay.
That took credit for it, but it's actually this guy's work, and he was not
Frenchman.
Frenchman.
Really?
And he's got a name. Go figure. But Madison pretty much put his signature on it. But this dude wrote it, and Teddy Roosevelt knew this guy, and he had a book or something that was written about this guy, and it was one of the most influential things as far as Roosevelt. So it must be a true story. Yeah, it's. But I need to fact check all of that.
Well, that's interesting. If that is true, I'd like to research that too.
Now, like I said, that idea that we could govern ourselves, that the lay people could, the common people could govern themselves if they had.
Pretty progressive.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, that's really.
You know, we don't.
They
need
don't
a
want us
king.
doing it now.
Yeah, we don't need a king. We don't need a church telling us what to do and how to behave. You know, we can be a society governed by law. You know, the rule of law prevails, and we're all subject to the rule of law, and that's what keeps us from killing each other, and that's what keeps us from cheating and you know, greed taking over, and the haves and the have-nots versus, you know, you can have so much, you can work hard and have it,
right?
But you know, we need to think about the have-nots too at the same time. You know, when So,
Have
I
you
think that's
spent
fascinating.
much time outside of Arkansas?
Have I?
Have
I?
you spent much time outside of it?
Just the time I was in Memphis.
Yeah.
When I worked for Airvac, I had contact with people in other states, Missouri, Oklahoma.
Sometimes I wonder, because I feel like we grew up in a pretty protected bubble here
Yeah.
in Northwest Arkansas.
did.
We didn't have a lot of racism, and I didn't experience a lot of the things I hear about. And I don't know if the media is making it worse than it is, or if I just grew up in a place that was, you got a university town surrounded by a bunch of redneck towns. Everybody's cool. It's a really cool place. It was a cool place to grow up. There were people from every walk of life around here, and so maybe it's easy for me to say, why can't we all just get along? Whereas if you live in the city and in the urban environment, and everybody's trying to hustle to get what they can,
Right.
we live in a very trustful society. I don't feel like I need to lock my doors.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just. Do you think there's something to that?
I do.
Where we grew up?
I do. I think there is, and you never know. There's always that bad element. There's
Sure.
you can't let your guard down, because that's when somebody's going to take advantage.
Yeah,
of you.
absolutely. And it's. I mean, you've been in Northwest Arkansas since when? The late '80s, you said?
The early '80s, yeah, '81 is when I came up here.
Oh, that's right. Because you said Jared was born here, right? So.
Yeah, he was born in '82. Jack was born in May of '80, and Jared was born in December of '81.
But yeah, because he's just a month younger than I am. But going back to when you would have moved up here, I mean, your kids went to Farmington, or at least it was all pasture.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how often have you been to it recently?
I came through there a while ago. I came up
Yeah.
and went to Double Springs to avoid the Weddington
Yeah.
congestion.
It's a town now.
Yeah.
It's got a Taco Bell and a Walmart.
Yeah.
How because obviously
Sonic.
you've got a few years on me of being an adult in this area. How far do you think this is going to go?
Man, I don't know. I was out Springdale today, and I went up by the Arvis Ballpark and by Sam's Children's Hospital and Sam's, and turned west on 412, and there's construction all down that highway, and it's just never ending. They're out where I live, just outside of Fayetteville on the southeast side of town. They're putting in a huge subdivision down there. I don't know. It's I guess yet to be seen how this all plays out.
I mean, it's just in the last 5 years, it's added 10 minutes to my drive just because of traffic.
Yeah, my wife gets some chuckles out of me because I plan my routes, and I verbalize them to her. And
Sure.
I'll tell her if she's going to stop for fast food on the way home, and bring for supper. I'll say, well, if you go to such and such place, you can turn in, then you can pull back out and make a right turn, so you don't have to cross traffic. You can go down to such and such street, and come in the back way. You know, that way you don't have to.
Yep.
Make yourself
Route planner.
Yeah, and she just, I've been driving here. Yeah, but it's getting worse. So she kind of chuckles whenever I start doing that.
Did you do most of the driving teaching on your boys?
Yeah.
How scary was that?
Pretty damn scary.
I'm just starting, man. I'm wearing holes in the floor with my imaginary brake.
Yeah. Yeah. They both had their mishaps, and it just goes with the territory. And then
y'all had a lot of good places to drive out where you're at. Just kind of get used to the vehicle on some county
Yeah.
roads and whatnot.
Yeah. I did a little bit of coaching with my stepchildren too. Yeah, I'm bald headed for a reason.
Yeah, I'll be that way soon. Well, sir, I'm going to wrap this up. We've
bet.
been going a while.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on,
Yeah,
Kurt.
enjoyed it.
It's been
Enjoyed
awesome. We'll do it again, hopefully.
Yeah.
If you're up for it.
Yeah, I'd like to come out and play some music.
I was
sometime,
about
too.
to say, next time, let's work a song up.
Sure.
And maybe we'll end up talking Jared into coming on with us one of these times.
Yeah. He was pretty good drum
Yeah,
back
he
in the
was.
day.
Yeah,
But yeah,
he was. He reminded me of that drum kit he won in that raffle. You remember that blue drum kit?
Yeah, I do now.
Through that music store? I had forgotten all about. I
Yeah.
had too.
Yeah, I can see the guy that ran the store.
Yeah.
Big guy. I've forgotten about that.
You know, Jared is my oldest friend, and we remained pretty close through high school. You know, it was. He's a unique character in my life, and it was neat sitting down with him because we hadn't sat down like that in 15, 20 years. We
Yeah.
talked on the phone a few times, but not just
Yeah.
in the same room. It's nice because I don't feel like people converse anymore.
Right.
How do you even make that happen unless you have a podcast?
That's right.
Because if you're at a family get-together, you get 2 minutes with everybody, and then you
Exactly.
don't feel like you see anybody. But
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. We've covered a lot of ground.
yeah, we'll definitely do it again. I appreciate you coming on, man.
You betcha.